We're through 12 weeks of the NFL season, and we've got the Thanksgiving slates ahead of us. So we'll do a deep dive into all of the players that you might not normally be thinking about as we get in the weeds on these Thanksgiving slates. This is Stat Chasing.
Pat Fryer Helmo.
This is why I'm hot.
Anita Handjob.
Fix your sight.
Jamar. Alpha play chase. Are you kidding me? Darius Tony?
You can't handle the heat.
It looks like we're finally at this point. You're right.
Good evening, Drico. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I'm thankful for football. And that we have it on Thanksgiving. So I guess that's how I'm feeling.
I too am thankful. I'm looking forward to a full day of lots and lots of DFS. We've got the 3 showdown slates, which are probably my favorite DFS format. And then we have the Thanksgiving short 3-game slate. So that is always a really fun one. Kind of shares some principles with Showdown because you do get into duplication stuff with a slate that short, where you can't end up with duplicated lineups where it's pretty hard in Classic typically. So I think tonight we'll probably have a slightly different show than we typically do. We're probably going to focus more on some of the fringier players that you normally would not be playing in weekly contests, really specifically with the framing of thinking through the Thanksgiving slate of games. So with that, I think we should go ahead and get into the quarterback chart.
Yeah, be helpful if I added to the stage, wouldn't it? Yeah, I mean, this is my 3rd year doing stat chasing, and I really like stat chasing. But in week 13, I'm thankful that Thanksgiving gives us a reason to change it up a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like we were kind of getting to the point where it felt like every week is like, all right, we've kind of already talked about a lot of these situations. And yes, there are some new situations that emerge where, we end up talking about those, but it just feels like there's a lot of the same and much less new the further we get into the season. So it'll be refreshing. One thing that I don't think will be refreshing for our listeners is we need to talk about the viability of Cooper Rush and Tommy DeVito and or Drew Lock. You'll notice that Tommy DeVito is not on the chart because we don't know if he's even going to play. He very well could be injured and out. So I didn't know if we should be listing Tommy DeVito or listing Drew Lock. Definitely a lot of ambiguity there, but let's start with Cooper Rush. He's a pretty cheap quarterback on the Thanksgiving slate. Drico, what are your thoughts about playing Cooper Rush?
So, Thanksgiving slate specifically. So that's a 3-gamer. So you have 6 quarterbacks in total. I guess that the thing that stands out to me is that for such a short slate, the people are going to laugh about the DeVito versus Cooper Rush matchup. But I think we actually do have some pretty strong options. Like Jared Goff is efficient. Tua Tagovailoa is efficient. We've talked many times about how strong Jordan Love is in GPPs. I can imagine him being strong on the ownership front. We've got Caleb Williams, who kind of impressed over the weekend. My kind of sense is that you don't really have to play those guys. I think they're probably more interesting in like a showdown context, which I'm less knowledgeable about, but I think more about them being like probably underowned in showdown. But it feels really hard for me to get in on those guys when you have some good QB plays. Like just if you let me rattle off the adjusted yards per attempt, So Jared Goff is 9.0, and Tua Tagovailoa 7.9, Jordan Love 7.5, and then Caleb Williams is 6.3. But I'm curious what, and I'm gonna look that up, what his has been in the last couple of games, whereas the other guys are much more in the weaker range.
Yeah, I mean, so just looking at the pricing for quarterbacks, Tommy DeVito and Cooper Rush are 4,500 and 4,800 respectively on the Thanksgiving 3-game slate over on DraftKings. And then the most expensive quarterback is Goff at 6,500. So you can save $2,000 if you go all the way down to Tommy DeVito, which is not significant.
Right.
Really,
That seems like a tight range of pricing. Like most expensive to least expensive starting QB, only a range of 2,000, and then actually a pretty big gulf in terms of quality.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think what it's going to come down to is what the ownership ends up being on Tommy DeVito and Cooper Rush, because I don't really think that, if they're coming in super under-owned, which they certainly could, like you're saying, I don't think people are going to be terribly excited to play them. So if they do come in really under-owned, I think that's a pretty good spot. We don't have projections out yet, so we can't say like how far apart Goff is going to be compared to those guys. I'd guess that Cooper Rush and Tommy DeVito probably come in around like anywhere between 13 to 15 fantasy points for their projection. And you'll probably
Here's the other thing: Caleb Williams is 5,300. So the $800 difference between Caleb Williams and like Cooper Rush, like I could almost see it being like super heavy on Caleb Williams and then also Jordan Love, who's $200 cheaper than Jared Goff, and has that kind of GPP appeal.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's what the field is going to want to do as well. I'm thinking that we're going to have Cooper Rush and Tommy DeVito end up being pretty good spots. You do get them
right
now. There's the 2 dome games, so really the only non-dome game is Miami Green Bay, and I haven't checked to see what the weather situation is there, but you do benefit from the other 2 games being in a dome. I just think that if you're going to end up with a super low-owned game, and it's not like the Dallas defense or the Giants defense have been particularly good. Dallas defense with a little bit of a better showing as they're getting healthier against the Commanders this past week. But, I mean, Cooper Rush is getting significant, like he's getting volume, so I'm just wondering, like, it might just be
What's funny about Cooper Rush is that his efficiency actually isn't that much worse than Dak Prescott's was. So he's at 5.4 adjusted yards per attempt, where Dak Prescott was at just 6.4, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, not the best season for Dak Prescott or the Cowboys at large. But I mean, if you look at Cooper Rush's last 2 games, the games where he throwing Philly out, more or less. But so if you look at the last 2, he had 61 attempts in week 11. Then he gets 34 attempts in week 12. So 61 attempts, like, I don't think you're going to get that very often. They were trailing, the whole game there. And then against Washington, it was much closer. So you don't get quite as high. But it's just, like, to me, it's not a foregone conclusion that they won't just end up going out there and passing. I really do think it probably depends on the Giants pushing them, though. But again, if you're going to get this whole game environment to come
so in, the total on that game is 38.5, and that's the Giants Cowboys. On the Bears and Lions, it's 48.5. And then Dolphins and Packers, it's 47.5.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly makes sense. I just, when you have like these really small slates, if it comes in where you're going to get like, sub 10% ownership on these quarterbacks, That's pretty hard when there's only 6 quarterbacks on the slate, right? So I don't know.
So the kind of I guess the base rate ownership on the quarterbacks is like 6 quarterbacks, and imagine they'd all be 16.7.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, somebody like maybe Chua goes way over, but somebody like that where maybe you're getting about 12% or something, like that seems more interesting to me than those guys at 5, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anyone goes way over, it's likely going to be Caleb Williams, just because like you said, he's not that far price removed. He's 800 up from Tommy DeVito, 500 up from Cooper Rush. He should project better than both of them, and he's going to be in probably like the game script where people can tell themselves, the most fun story. And if you look at where Caleb's at on the chart, like he has been improving over the last couple weeks. He's almost up to the average for expected fantasy points from passing. He has been more efficient these last couple weeks as well, but his season-long efficiency is kind of holding him back here.
But, so since in the last 2 weeks he's at 7.5 yards per attempt, adjusted yards per attempt, and then 8.1 adjusted yards per attempt. He had 320 air yards in the last game, so good volume, and then he definitely made some wow throws. The other thing I want to ask you, are you playing any of the underdog?
I am not. I don't do anything that's under 12 people on Underdog, under 12 drafters.
Okay. So, I guess the other thing that strikes me, and this is something I kind of discovered playing when I was playing those kind of shorter slates, is that it's almost like a last man out thing at quarterback, where you just try and put off taking a quarterback as long as you possibly can. And I imagine that becomes even more kind of pronounced in this where there's actually six options.
Yeah, in general, I would think that's probably the way to attack this slate. You really don't want to give up the difference in projection from some of the premium skill position pieces compared to, the difference in projection from quarterback is likely just going to be a lot smaller than the difference in having to go from, say, like a David Montgomery, assuming that he's active, down to like an Emmanuel Wilson or something, which I believe, is there Emmanuel Wilson injury as well? I want to say.
So looking at RotoWire, I don't think so.
Okay. I just saw in the game, I saw that they got 10 snaps for Chris Brooks, which seemed like a lot to me. Emmanuel Wilson only with 11, four attempts for Chris Brooks too. We can save this for the running back charts, but
yeah. So actually, I think we're good to move on from this chart.
Yeah, let's hit to running backs.
And I'll zoom out here. And so I had my running back chart kind of filtered down to just the guys playing on the Thanksgiving slates. So I guess the big notable thing is that at least as far as the last game went, there's none. You have to get all the way down to a Chan or Josh Jacobs to get through to the true bell cows here, and so there's not going to be any kind of volume kings. It's kind of efficiency. Like Josh Jacobs, he excels in the run through a motherfucker's face. and he's been playing well. So he's probably, I don't know, him, Echan are probably like the favorite picks, the top expected picks. And then the other piece that's interesting is, so Tyrone Tracy appeared to get benched, or not benched. I think benched is probably the wrong way to put it. But actually, you know what, benched, where he was not on the field for 62% of the snaps.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why that was. I don't know if he.
I think he had like some fumbles.
Okay.
And he had the big fumble last week, and they asked like, "Hey, are you gonna limit this guy?" And then he had another fumble.
Got it. So I mean, that makes Singletary pretty interesting to me. Then you get Singletary against a bad Cowboys run defense, and we know that Singletary can consolidate a lot of work. So
I guess the problem is that it became a true like committee where Eric Ray played a bunch as well.
Got it.
So I don't know. I don't think that's like groundbreaking or anything, but that's something where so if I just quote it in kind of useful snaps, so that's rush attempts plus routes. These three guys, they combine for 70% of snaps, and I think the rest is blocking. But 28% for Tyrone Tracy, 23% for Devin Singletary, 18% for Eric Gray. That just does kind of strike me as like, I guess the thing about Tracy, he still had like a 12.8 expected points.
Yeah, I'm looking at it here, and it looks. I mean, Tracy still got the majority of the carries. He got nine rush attempts here, only 1 for Eric Gray, only 2 for Devin Singletary. So I wonder if it is really just like a one game type of thing where it was only, hey, we're going to punish you for fumbling, but you're still going to be the lead guy, because it doesn't appear that they have a ton of confidence in Devin Singletary or Eric Gray to then take on a big workload if they're benching Tyrone Tracy, just based on what we saw last game.
Right. Most of the work that he lost was kind of was route running, which is kind of interesting. Which
it might have been partially that they were down so much in the game, so it was like there weren't lots of carries to be had. It was mostly just trailing.
Right. And I guess they didn't want they didn't want to lean on him for the receiving work. Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, so we certainly have some added ambiguity to the Giants' backfield that we normally wouldn't have. The Packers' backfield also with a little ambiguity in the second guy between either Emmanuel Wilson or Chris Brooks. They both got snaps, both got attempts. Chris Brooks with 4 carries. So
the only thing I wonder about the Green Bay kind of split is, so they did go up quite a bit, or not a bit. They had the game in hand for a lot of the snaps, and I do wonder if that's when they started like working in the other like Chris Brooks, etc.
Yeah, the one that I actually think is probably the most actionable out of the entire slate is Jalen Wright. Mostert only saw 2 attempts, and Jalen Wright got up to 7. Again, they were really ahead against the Patriots, right? They were blowing them out. They had the backups in.
Right. They did have the backups in.
But they were using Jalen Wright before the backups were in. He was getting some touches prior to them sitting all of the starters. And Mostert has really, like, let me pull up Mostert's snaps specifically here, because it does feel like he is just being used less and less as the season progresses here. Yeah, he actually got a decent number of snaps, his highest snaps in 4 weeks this last week. But I'm wondering if that was just a side effect of them being so far ahead. Let me pull up Wright here. Yeah, and Wright now, while Wright saw less snaps than Mostert, he saw a lot more carries. So it's just kind of like Mostert out there to be out there because he's like a trusted veteran, and they're trying to get the ball to Wright when he's on the field.
Right.
13 snaps.
And that does kind of suggest that he was on the field kind of to salt the game away as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think it's interesting though. I think, when you're on these really small slates, it can be
that's the type of thing to play.
Yeah, you're looking for these spots where you're trying to get ahead of the field by 1 week. You're trying to say, hey, I see that Jalen Wright is the one that's actually getting the touches between him and Mostert. I wish I could go and see when all the touches occurred on PFF, because from watching the game, he did get a couple early, but I don't know exactly how many came after the game was out of hand here.
Yeah, I can look it up on the Rotoviz screener.
Okay,
but it just I wish there was a more like you. I wish there was a more kind of like intuitive tool.
Yeah,
or just quicker.
You can if you want to go to the next chart, there is a guy on the next chart that I think is also potentially relevant on the short Thanksgiving slate. Where did I guess Roschon Johnson is not getting enough snaps here. Let me pull him up.
So Jalen Wright. Okay, I have the answer. Of Jalen Wright's 7 rush attempts, 6 came in the fourth quarter.
Okay. So he did just get the one earlier, but more.
He was in the salt the game role.
Yeah. Actually, go to the previous chart because I must have missed Roschon Johnson there.
Where is Roschon?
I don't know. He's been getting. He certainly has enough snaps to qualify. So. I'm wondering why he's not showing up here. Well, last game, Roschon got 37 snaps. Now, some of those are special teams. 29 of them were actually useful on offense. And that's compared to 30 in the previous game, 20 in the game before that, 28 in the game prior to that. So these last 4 games, he's certainly been getting opportunities. He can get some passing game stuff. He can get the short yardage and goal line stuff. So he's pretty interesting to me as well. Like if you had to rank Roschon Johnson, Emmanuel Wilson, or Jalen Wright as far as like your level of interest in these kind of secondary backs, which one are you most interested in playing?
So Roschon, if we're looking at kind of like expected points over the last couple of weeks, Roschon is coming in with about 6.9 expected points per game over the last 4 weeks since week 9. I'm also not sure why he's showing up on the chart. We've got Ty Johnson on the chart. We don't have Roschon Johnson on the chart. I wonder. We'll have to look powerfully into that.
Yes.
So he's coming in at about 7 expected points per game, and then after that, Jalen Wright with about 3.4. And who's the other guy you said?
Jalen Wright, Roschon Johnson, and Emmanuel Wilson.
He's coming in about 3.9. So, I mean, just even though So let me look up Roschon again. So Roschon, even though he's only on the field, so he's only on the field for 37% of snaps. Actually, that's why he's not showing up on the and then his useful snaps, rush plus routes plus rush attempts is 24%. So that's why he doesn't show up here, and he does actually miss that threshold.
Wow.
But
okay.
I guess because he's gotten that goal line work. Let me look up his weekly. So he's actually got a pretty good goal line role in the last 2 games he's played in. And if you look at his average on the last 2 games, it's actually 7 and no, that's his average on the last 2 games is actually about 10 points. So he's actually like, with that goal line role, he's actually pretty viable in a real way. I don't know how much he's going to get played, but as a cheaper punt option, he is like head and shoulders above all those other guys.
Yeah, I would guess that makes him pretty popular. Then he's 4,500 on the slate, just 100 more than Ezekiel Elliott. So Roschon seems like a pretty good option then, if you are trying to get gross at running back. I mean, here's some of the other, like secondary options. You got Zeke Elliott, and I already know how you feel there. That I believe that you're not playing Zeke Elliott under any circumstance. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, I can't do it.
I can't even sell you on Zeke jumping in the Salvation Army bucket on Thanksgiving.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be playing very much Zeke as well. If we do want to, there's one more guy I just wanted to talk about very briefly on the previous chart.
Scroll on the wrong one.
So Rico Dowdles has been getting pretty substantial role these last couple weeks here. He's getting the receiving work as well. I believe he had 3 targets in this last game. But he's definitely an interesting one. I mean, the problem is that Rico's ceiling is tied to the Cowboys offense scoring touchdowns, which seems quite difficult for them.
Right.
Yeah, in the past 3, past 3 games, he's had 3 targets, 5 targets, and 3 targets. So he's involved in the receiving game. And then he had 24 attempts against Washington. So that was when the Cowboys were kind of playing from ahead. You also can attack Washington on the ground, but you can attack the Giants on the ground as well. So,
yeah, so at least on a snap basis, his role is as steady as anybody else's. It's as steady as a Chan. It's as steady as Josh Jacobs. He's coming in a little bit under on the expected points. The last 4 weeks, he's at 14 expected points. But I do think you've got to. One thing that will probably keep any one individual player's ownership down. You do actually have like a decent helping of different options. Like DeAndre Swift is interesting. David Montgomery is interesting. Like Jahmyr Gibbs is probably like the one guy that everybody wants to play. Let me see what his tag is. So he's at 7,500. Josh Jacobs at 7,000. And David Montgomery is 6,500. Like these all seem like not price prohibitive.
The pricing is pretty loose on the slate.
So I could see that keeping someone like Roschon like really, really low on the ownership.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the big things that you'll want to do on this slate is you're probably going to want to leave a little salary. more than you would typically think to leave, just again because it is a short slate and the pricing's pretty loose. I mean, even for wide receivers, the most expensive is Amon-Ra, and then you have only CD and Neighbors are the only other two that are above 7,000. Then every other receiver is below 6,000. You can get I'm assuming Dobbs is going to be out with the concussion. I don't think there's any way that he clears. So you end up with, there's a couple pretty interesting, super cheap Packers receivers. Like you get Bo Melton, he's 3,100. That's actually one that I think is pretty interesting. Dontavion Wicks is probably the one that catches all the steam, right? He's 4,200, and I assume that people will just want to play him if Dobbs misses. But we can save that for the wide receiver charts. Let's move on to some efficiency stuff for the running backs here.
Sure. And I think we can be pretty quick on the efficiency stuff. Just we can note who has been efficient.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Dowdle, not with a terribly disappointing efficiency, right? Like only slightly smaller than 0 fantasy points over expected per game. He's not sitting there in like the Kareem Hunt or Jonathan Taylor levels of inefficiency. As somebody who could kind of get caught as in a loose slate of people not being really interested in Rico Dowdles, he's somebody who could be very interesting given his role is as strong as anybody else's on the slate. He just plays on a crappy offense. Yeah. And you get the nice matchup against the Giants. The Cowboys are actually favored too, which we saw what they did in the game against Washington where they did have the lead. They were willing to run the ball. And so if they do lead like the spread implies, then it does seem to set up pretty well for Dowdle. So really, I think then it's just going to come down to how owned is Dowdle actually going to be. I would assume he gets pretty popular, but less popular than say like a Josh Jacobs or a Chan.
Yeah, it's just there's like Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery have to be like everybody's going to want to play them. I imagine there's actually a decent number of teams that play both of them. Then people are going to love playing a Chan. People are going to love playing Josh Jacobs. My point is more like somebody like Rico Dowdles. I could see him like just like not being clicked.
Yeah, I mean with there being so few like actual starting running backs, I'm sure he'll get some ownership, but yeah, he's much less sexy to play than the other guys. Also, with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, you've got the dynamic of Montgomery leaving the game with a shoulder injury, I believe it was.
Right,
so
right.
What I've heard is that they think he will play, but I wonder I wonder how effective.
Well, it sounded like they kept him out of the game because they thought that the Chicago game would be like so important for him that they wanted them like ready for that.
Yeah. So could just be an abundance of caution there.
And then the only other guy we haven't talked about too much is DeAndre Swift, who, I guess with Roschon getting this kind of goal line role, there's been less of that for Swift. And so he's been at like 11 expected points in week 11, 12 in week 12, 9 in week 10, and week 9 really the last time Swift had like a substantial role. I feel like he's somebody who could get like kind of the tag of like people look at him in the mindset of a starting running back, but not actually like. A lot of the trends for him are kind of not the best. Like let me look up his. So Yeah, I guess he's kind of like the in between the 20s running back, where he's on the field for 60% of snaps, but he's not getting goal line. He's not getting that much receiving.
Yeah, I mean, really, if you're playing Swift, you're betting on that he is really efficient and that he scores a touchdown from
Right. You need 2 or 3 touchdowns, probably.
Yeah. So I don't love that. If you give him to me low owned enough, I'll do that because that is the way that Swift has gotten there in the past.
Right.
Is he breaks off these long touchdown runs where he catches a pass in space and then takes it to the house. So
right,
he can do that. It's just
right. That's what he does. Like you said, that's what he does.
But if that's your only path, it's not someone I really want to play into ownership, right?
Right. No, not at all. I think we talked about almost every we talked about every backfield.
Yeah, we can go ahead and move to the next charts.
So, yeah, moving to tight ends. I don't know. Tucker Kraft is on the slate. Jonnu Smith, who just had the big, huge game, is on the slate. Sam LaPorta is on the slate. Luke Schoonmaker is on the slate. You've got a Cole Kmet is on the slate.
I was going to say, you haven't even said my favorite tight end yet for the slate, but yeah, Cole Kmet is the one I'm interested in.
And so Cole Kmet has had he had some big games, but he's been pretty quiet as of late. His usage metrics, like at 82% of routes and then 15% of targets per out run, is kind of mediocre. But then we have seen him capable of these big, huge games too.
Well, and in this past week against Minnesota, he did get 10 targets. So to me, that's pretty encouraging because we saw the 11 target game earlier in the season where he had that big blow up game, went for just under 100 yards and a touchdown and 10 receptions. This last week against Minnesota, he gets 10 targets again. So it's just encouraging to see that with Thomas Brown calling the plays now and the offense being more functional, that like at least they're aware that Cole Kmet is a good player that they can get the ball to. So I'm hopeful there. And
his kind of target stuff, it seems very spiky, where like he's like the week before, week 11, he was at 9% targets per run. This week he was at 23%. His 10 targets was on 55 dropbacks.
Right. So it's a higher volume game for the offense.
Right. But I think certainly a very very interesting player that hasn't popped in a big way in a long time. So may go under the radar a little more than he should. Like Jonnu's going to get the attention. Then Sam LaPorta, he's at 70 in the last 4 weeks, 76% routes run, and then with actually an improved 20% targets per run, which is much better than it was earlier in the year. His full season targets per run is down at 15%, so it has been improving. And I know it was stuck at like 10 for his first couple of weeks.
Yeah, LaPorta, I'm a little less interested in. It just, the Lions just feel like so multiple, that they have so many different ways to beat you, that LaPorta is really just like a luxury for them. It almost feels like every once in a while they decide like we should get LaPorta a touchdown, like, or it's almost like a bit like, all right, let's get LaPorta involved here, because like, yes, his targets recently are better than the absolutely abysmal stretch he had to start the season, but
they're in line with Cole Kmet's.
Yeah, I mean, but LaPorta is not getting like the targets in spikes. He's never seen more than 6 targets in a game. And if I'm trying to win a GPP, I'd rather have it be Cole Kmet, where I know that if the stars align, he could get double-digit targets. Where with Sam LaPorta, it feels pretty feels really, really unlikely for him to get double-digit targets, seeing as he's never had more than 6 this entire season. I mean, the situations where I'd be the most open to playing Sam LaPorta and like searching for that ceiling game is when I think that the Lions are going to be in a really tight game with a lot of scoring. Like I want them to be forced to pass to increase the passing volume so he can get more targets that way. And I want them to feel pressure to where they're having to actually like maybe their best options are being taken away from them more effectively than they're used to. And they're having to go to LaPorta because right now it just feels like he's not really necessary, right? They can always, if they don't have to, if they're not able to beat you with Amon-Ra, they'll do it with JMO. If, you know, and obviously their preferred way to beat you is just, we're going to run Gibbs and Montgomery down your throat, and then we'll mix in the pass a little bit.
I don't think we should throw out last year, though. Like, he had 4 games last year where he had double-digit targets, and then he also had a 9 target game. Like, I don't want to just throw that out.
No, yeah, I'm not
like. I think if like I don't know. I honestly see him as a pretty similar option to Cole Kmet.
Okay.
Where I don't want to like just get too too focused in on Cole Kmet had these high target games this year and Sam LaPorta hasn't. Like, so that means that it can't happen. Like we see these tight end games all the time where a team just can't cover the tight end, so they the tight end gets a bunch of work.
Yeah, no, that's certainly reasonable. I think that you're likely to see projections favor LaPorta over Cole Kmet, and LaPorta is 500 more expensive than Cole Kmet.
I think people, more casual people, are way more likely to play LaPorta than Cole Kmet. So I think that certainly makes sense.
Yeah, there are some tight ends that people are going to be less familiar with that might actually be worth playing on this slate. Luke Schoonmaker, we talked about last week. I think he might be off the menu if Ferguson plays. If Ferguson doesn't play, I think Schoonmaker will turn into super chalk.
Yeah, and he was only at 60% routes run last week. 60% routes run, 15% targets per run. I don't know. That doesn't seem great to me. Like, I think I'd rather Theo Johnson than Luke Schoonmaker by a good amount.
The other thing that you'll sometimes see people do on these really short slates is you play 2 tight ends because the pricing is so loose. You play 1 tight end in the flex. That's just an absolute cheap punt. And then you play another tight end, and those 2 are just so cheap combined that you literally get to jam all of the good skill position players then. So the guy that would actually be the most interesting to me to do that, like if you're going to play, a really cheap tight end just to punt in the flex, I think Theo Johnson is pretty interesting. What are your thoughts on him?
So Theo Johnson, I am a little bit surprised that his routes came in a little bit last week. So his route percentage was just 63% versus 76% on the season. I don't want to get
off the injury. He had a back injury he was dealing with.
Oh, okay. I was about to say I don't want to like dial too much into it, but and I wondered if there was an injury. And then he did have his target volume has been up too, so I think that is interesting. On a short, like I guess on a short slate, he's certainly very, very. I don't know if he's strong, but he's certainly very, very viable.
Yeah, only 2,900. I mean, he's probably the cheapest, like point per
Strong
dollar
tight ends.
or like targets per dollar. Like he's probably gonna be one of the better values on the
Right.
slate, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, he's had 6 targets in each of the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, he's pretty interesting there. Let's see. There's really, I mean, like maybe you could say you want to see a little Brock Wright. Dan Campbell loves him some Brock Wright. Maybe you get a little Brock Wright touchdown. I don't really think I'm playing any Brock Wright. He's also more expensive than Theo Johnson. So, if you're looking to punt tight end, I'm probably just doing Theo Johnson.
Right. And then of the I guess just in terms of showdown, with some I see Brevin Span Ford, who's honestly very similar to Luke Schoonmaker in terms of routes. He's just a little bit under him, and he's just a little bit under him in targets.
Yeah, I'd be really interested if Ferguson misses. But if Ferguson doesn't miss, I'm pretty uninterested in Brevin.
It's hard to get different on the small sites because the player pool is so small. But right, you need Ferguson to miss to be interested. But as a pivot off of Schoonmaker, and I imagine I'm going to guess that he's min price.
He's 2,700, so he's not mid, but he's close.
Okay, that seems interesting.
Yeah, yeah, with you on that. If Ferguson misses, pretty interested in Brevin Spanford. Otherwise, probably not. I might have him in a showdown lineup or something, but I'm MMEing. So
right, yeah. And then we said we talk a little bit more about the more tertiary guys. You also you mentioned Brock Wright. You also have Julian Hill for the Dolphins, who, I mean, you're probably looking at 2 or 3 targets here. Yeah, you're looking at 2 targets probably in the game, and that's probably more showdown stuff.
Yeah, I think too thin to play on the 3-game slate, but if there's in showdown, if you're playing the flagship, the largest field lotto, if a guy is running more than 5 routes and they're very cheap, they're sub $1,000, you can play them. You can play a kick returner that runs 3 routes, on average a game.
Right.
You're for example, the slate where I won the play action this year, I had Tylan Wallace from the Ravens in. He'd been running barely double-digit routes prior to that. I'll pull him up here. But if you get a min price guy that's out there running routes, that's worth playing. So yeah, here's the Tylan Wallace routes here. He had 8. This is from week 5. 8, 5, 5, 5, 6. Those are his routes. And then in the game where he went off and had 115 yards and a touchdown, he had 5 routes for 3 targets, 3 receptions, 115 yards and a touchdown. So the reason that you play those min price guys that are running 5 routes or something is because it allows you to play a very good lineup around them and have a relatively low owned lineup that you're playing. It's not going to be duplicated very much. And when that guy scores a touchdown, it doesn't have to happen very often, but when he scores a touchdown and the rest of your lineup that you played is good, then you bink. And so that's kind of why you play those really, really low owned guys. It's just
we're talking about Julian Hill, right? Yeah. So he had 11 routes, 16 routes, 10 routes in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, so he definitely seems like someone that will make it into my showdown set.
Got it. And I'm looking at the rest of these guys. I don't think we need to talk too much more.
I don't think any of the rest of them are terribly viable. So we can move on to receivers here.
So this is the receiving chart. Sorry about the dead noise there. And I guess contrary to kind of like a pretty, if the running back seems like a lot of kind of medium type of guys, whereas you have on this one you have CeeDee Lamb. On the receivers you have CeeDee Lamb, you have Malik Neighbors, you have Tyreek Hill, you have Jalen Waddle, you have Rome Odunze, you have DJ Moore, you have all these Packers, you have all these Bears, and some pretty high powered offenses. And I guess I think the temptation probably will be to see how many of these like stud receivers you can get in the lineup, and it's kind of trying to find who's the guy who's just below that level who has a good game.
Yeah, I mean the one that's like if you want a really gross one, I mean Jalen Tolbert has been running lots of routes, pretty consistently getting targets. Like he hasn't had under 4 targets since week 8. So he's getting those targets. Now, the bad thing is he's not really doing anything with them. He's managed to fall in the end zone or get in the end zone a couple times in the last 4 weeks. So to me, his ceiling feels pretty limited. He's not getting a ton of yardage. His biggest yardage game was back in week 5 where he went for 87. But that was just he just got peppered with targets, had 10 targets that game. He hasn't really shown anything like that since. So he seems like at the very least an interesting play for a touchdown for me. Now his price is $3,800, so he's basically in the price range of some of the better tight ends, like $3,800. That'd be $100 more expensive than Tucker Kraft, $100 cheaper than Jake Ferguson. So I don't know. He's at the very least interesting to me just because he's on the field and he's getting lots of routes. And again, like everyone wants to play the good, everyone wants to play the good players. So
right. No, he's
the guy who's out here running lots of routes.
Right. The other one that strikes me in that kind of range is as like a Darius Slayton. His routes did seem to tail off the last game. He was down at just like 50% in week 12. I honestly I don't know if that was like an injury or if like he was very upset when they released Daniel Jones. Oh, he had an injury. Okay.
Yeah, I know Hyatt's routes have been trending up, I believe. I'll pull him up here.
Jalen Hyatt, he was up at 81% of routes run.
Unfortunately, no targets.
Well, no, he got 4 targets. Or am I looking at? No, that's week 10. He got 4 targets.
Yeah, that's Carolina. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So yeah, no targets last week, but I mean he is a deeper. He operates deeper down the field. So you could like his ADOT. Now he's not getting targets in a ton of games, but his ADOT the last time he got targeted in Carolina was 9.5. Had an ADOT of 32 against Philly. So he's got an ADOT of 53 and 43 here. Most of those are just 1 target games. The one game where he got 4 targets is an ADOT of 16. So I like the call of you started on Slayton, but with Slayton dealing with the injury, I think Hyatt is at the very least interesting as well. Basically, with Hyatt, you're just like, can he get one of these deep targets and turn it into a touchdown? That's really what you're playing for.
Right.
So it's on these small slates, like we said, it does start to kind of feel like showdown adjacent, where you're like, can this guy score a touchdown or do anything? But he's only 3,200, so he is very cheap. Now, there's a couple guys right around this price range that I think are some of the better plays on the slate. So like you have Kevontae Turpin at 3,300. I kind of wonder though if he had the kick return touchdown in the game prior to that. He had the big 64-yard touchdown. So like he is Kevontae Turpin has been flashing lately. So I kind of think he might catch some steam in this range of guys. But then
he's at 18% routes run and 17% targets per run. So he had that 17% is good for one target in week 12. So I think you are probably better off going with the guys who are out there running routes.
Yeah. So what do you think? Let's we can move on from this wide receiver 1 chart, because I feel like the guys that are worth talking about are going to be these more tertiary guys. Because I don't think we're going to tell people anything revelationary for the guys that they know they want. Right. In fact, I think we probably just want to go all the way. We want to go down to the dumpster here. Let's go down to the final.
I'm trying to find if there's any the other guys, because we're trying to identify routes, but no, I don't see anybody here. That's somebody we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, the ones that I'm really interested in that I was teasing are guys who haven't been running routes or very many routes lately, but they should get opportunity here due to injury. Dontavion Wicks is one who will get increased opportunity, very likely, with Dobbs likely to miss. But I think Bo Melton is the one that I really don't want to sleep on. He's not even going to show up on this chart because he doesn't even have 40% routes run. But Bo Melton, let me pull him up here. In the last game, just had 8 routes. I could see that going up because the Dobbs injury didn't happen until later in the game. Now, I believe, let's compare that to Wicks here. Yeah, Wicks up at 11 routes. So him and Melton in like a similar range of routes. Now, we've seen Wicks get on the field more this season than we've seen Melton get on the season. Wicks did have some weeks where he was running more routes. The most Melton's ever had in a week was only 13. All the way back.
And the most targets he's had is 3. I think I hate saying it like this, but I think we can be fairly sure that Bo Melton needs two injuries to be really relevant, because his season high here is 45% routes. I guess season high in games that he saw target, because otherwise he doesn't show up on the on the table.
Yeah, so it sounds like what you're saying is Bo Melton, no on the 3-gamer, but maybe in Showdown.
Yeah, definitely more of a Showdown play, I think. Okay.
What about another guy in this price range? Is Odell Beckham? What do you do you have any thoughts on Odell Beckham?
So let me see where he comes up. So he has been playing for a while now. And so 47%, and I'm going to start with week 10, 47% routes, 37% routes, 38% routes. And you're looking at an average of about 3 targets a game here. And you're looking at an ADOT of about 10. I think that is also more of a showdown.
Yeah, it's just he has to score a touchdown, and even if he scores a touchdown and you played him on the 3-game slate, like what's your bet? Your best case scenario is maybe 10 points, right? A touchdown, a couple receptions, 20 yards or something. Because he hasn't had.
You're breeding a sigh of relief.
Yeah. So probably solid showdown play. too gross for the 3-gamer. Is there anyone else that you have as someone that you think you could actually play on a 3-game slate that might be one of these deeper dumpster dives?
I don't think he's like a deepster dumpster dive, but Romeo Dobbs is only 4,600.
Well, he has the concussion, so he's not.
Okay. He has a concussion.
Yeah, that's why I was saying that we could see the increased route volume.
Okay, I missed that.
For
and so
Melton.
does Christian Watson, does he have an injury too, or do they?
I don't believe so. No.
Okay. So it's just Dobbs who's injured.
Right.
I don't know why I thought that it was Watson who was hurt.
I mean, that's a safe assumption to make that Christian Watson is hurt.
Right. I was like, oh, Packers injury. It must be Christian Watson. So he's only 4,900. And then Wicks is 4,200. Yeah, I guess both of those guys will be the cheap plays that people use to make things work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty interested in.
We didn't talk about Tim Patrick. He's the other guy.
Tim Patrick's a good one. Tim Patrick's a really good one. Yeah,
I had him in my head before the show, and then I almost just let us. Oh no, I'm good. I don't. Yeah. So Tim Patrick, he will have weeks where he's at like week 9. He was at 78% of routes. I think that was probably the JMO week. And then he was at 68% in week 11, 50% in week 12, and he's seen 4 targets the last 2 weeks. So I think he's like not that much. There's not that much more meat on the bone relative to some of the guys you just can't play, but there's just enough that there's something to play there.
Yeah, he is. I would say he's borderline viable for the 3-gamer, and he is really, really interesting for Showdown because you have the Khalif Raymond injury as well. So I think that'll elevate his playing time. So I think if we wanted to summarize, like, of the gross receivers, it's basically the Packers, like Dontavion Wicks. I think Watson's probably like too mainstream to get to count as gross. So I guess you're looking at Wicks and Tim Patrick, and then I think I'm still with you that Melton is probably too gross to play on the 3-gamer. I mean, Tim Patrick, if he comes in low owned on Showdown, would be a smash. I don't think you'll get him to fly under the radar on Showdown, but he's right on the borderline for the 3-gamer. As someone that's at the very least worth a sprinkle in if you're max entering.
Right. And then I think it's kind of worth talking about the Chicago guys, where they all seem to cannibalize each other enough that they're not going to be I have a hard time seeing any of them be popular.
I mean, it's such a small slate, and I could definitely see people playing this game as the game that goes off because it's against the Lions. Let's flip back to the wide receiver 1 chart because I believe they all live on there.
Yeah, you're right. They all run so many routes.
So Adunze and Keenan are both in that the wind sprinter quadrant here. And then
but it's kind of like, so Christian Watson and Wicks are in the 4,000s, and then Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze are 5,000 and 5,100. So it's only a couple dollars. It's only a couple bucks more to move up price wise from Wicks and Watson to these Chicago guys, and then DJ Moore is only 5,600.
I mean,
so they are in the win sprinter. I get it because they've been cannibalizing each other so much. But I do wonder if that's kind of like if these are the guys who are kind of in the middle when people are using the Packers to jam the studs. if
What do
those
you?
guys are worth playing. I think they are.
Yeah. So, I mean, this last week you got that really high pass attempts game from the Bears here. It kind of sets up to be another really high pass attempts game for them. I would assume they'll be playing from behind against Detroit, who's a very good offense. Like we've seen Detroit have these big shootout games. If there's one offense that I have confidence in being able to overcome the strong Bears defense, it's Detroit.
Right.
I mean, we saw the Vikings do just fine against them, right? They were able to push them and have a game that yielded a pretty fruitful fantasy environment. It might just be as easy as saying, I'm going to take Caleb Williams, who's underpriced, and I'm just going to stack him with all three receivers. I'm just doing a Bears onslaught. That's what I'm going to do. It won't be owned enough,
Right.
And like you said, the receivers are all relatively cheap. And I mean, shoot, just pretend, just in your mind's eye, for anyone who's thinking, oh, that you'll never get there doing that. It's a 3-game slate, so you don't need as many points, right? You're just looking to capture some points here. And if
Caleb Williams plays really good?
Well, and so if you got the exact result that you got last week, so you get 106-1 on 7 receptions for DJ Moore, you get 8 targets, only 5 receptions for 39 yards for Roma Dunze. So that one you're not happy with, right? And then you get 16 targets, 9 receptions, 86-1 for Keenan Allen. I mean, just could you imagine what if Caleb Williams threw one more touchdown and it went to Roma Dunze there, And what if it happened to be one of those deep passes that they've been so close at connecting on? And so then you get 3 guys averaging close to 100 yards, each with a touchdown on a 3-game slate, all stacked up at the quarterback. I think that's a way that I'm pretty interested in attacking this slate. Just doing the full Bears onslaught in a game with the highest total that we think could really be a fun one.
Right, and they're all like 5,000, so you're getting that stacked for like 22,000. So very, very cheap.
Yeah, fuck it. I might throw Cole Kmet in there too. Just do the Bears quad. Why not?
Right. What could go wrong? But I do. So I'm saying this completely blind without ownership, which is stupid. But I do see that as a potentially very strong pivot off of the cheap Packers.
Yeah. No. I think you're right. I think it's. Again, we'll have to see how ownership and projections shake out and how much people are going to be leaning into that, the Bears and Lions game through the Bears side. But from an early look, I really don't hate the idea of like these Bears onslaughts. Right.
And then, so I think that kind of covers us I think we've kind of talked through pretty much everything on the showdown stuff. Is there anything otherwise, like any of these positions that we should be?
I don't think so. I think we covered the most interesting angles for the Thanksgiving slates. So yeah, I think with that we can wrap up. Hope you are all going to enjoy a day full of food and football and family in whichever order you prefer. And good luck. We will see you next week for week 13.
Yeah. See you, everybody. Thanks for joining.